Another thing is, I like conflict. I like to get in your face. I like to yell at you. I do it with my graduate students. I do it with people I work with. But I'm also, I think, one of the first people who say, oh yeah, you're right, I'm wrong. I'm a very aggressive, passive person. We've always heard about passive-aggressive people, but there's a whole other set of us out there that are extremely aggressive, but we're willing to go along with the better idea. There's a thing called the Abilene Paradox. Have any of you ever heard of it? The Abilene Paradox is a thing that was written in 1974 by a guy named Harvey, believe it or not. And what he talked about was he had to take a trip from this little town in Texas to Abilene, Texas. It was about 100 miles away, and he didn't want to do it, but the three friends that got together talked each other into doing it because no one had any reason to conflict with it. So they all hated the job and they hated everything else. What I'm looking at here is, what's the importance of conflict? Don't get trapped into research group think. We're all going to do the same thing. We're all going to be statistically driven. We're all going to go out and collect data. And all of a sudden you have to say, why? Are you all the same? Do you all have the same talents? Just because you have a universal language called statistics or math or economics doesn't mean that's what you should do. Look for what's really driving you in your research. Mine is literally fun. If it's not fun, I don't do it. I just don't. I'm just at that stage of my career, I just don't do it anymore. Okay? Here's how you get opportunities for creativity. The first, and I'll go through these a little bit faster. Unexpected. Something happens, you just said, how did this happen? We had this gigantic collapse of the banking industry in the United States. All the economists, all the finance people, they didn't see it. They didn't understand it. They didn't see what was coming on. So there's a tremendous amount of research that will be stepping in right now and say, how did this happen? It was totally unknown, unexpected at the time. That was a failure. The incongruent. The incongruent means what it is and what it should be. Let me give you a little bit of advice. We talked about it at dinner before we came. The United States is going to crater in the next 6 to 9 months. And it's because of this statement right here. And that statement is, Barack Obama, the president, is defining things as it should be, rather than what it is. And what he hasn't done is looked at the length of time and the money it takes to get from where it is to what it ought to be, and how long it's going to take. And about 6 months from now, everybody's going to say, he's not doing anything. He's got all these grandiose ideas, he's up there waving his hands and all around, and I'm not a Republican or Democrat, I'm totally apolitical, I really am. I think he's smart, but I don't think he understands how much it takes to move this to there. We're going to solve the problem in the Middle East. Oh yeah, right. Gee, we won't have screwed with that for 200 years, but you got to figure it out by next June, it'll be taken care of. We're going to do away with atomic weapons and stuff. No, you're not. And that's silly to make that as one of your commitments. Well, I'm going to have some of my people run General Motors. Holy Christ, if they went bankrupt before, can you imagine what it's going to be like now? He's making all these commitments, and what he's not doing, he's not understanding that what ought to be and what is are two different things. And what it takes to get from what it ought to be to what it is a very long, arduous process. To look at this incongruity, so my friends and I are working on a thing called expectation lowering processes. How can I get these people's expectations down to where we're going to be rather than where he said we were going to be? How do I get you to lower your expectations on where you're going to get a job? How can I get you to get that more in line with what's more than likely plausible? Okay? Another opportunity is based on process. This is a process. The first class I taught in college, I had 958 students, and I had a chalkboard this big that I was drawing on, trying to get people in this room to focus on it. This is a lot easier. The process changed, therefore it gave me some opportunity to be more creative. And the structure changes. You know, the American automobile industry is changing, the mining industry here is changing. Wherever country you're going to, it's changing. And the reason it's changing is the economists used to tell us, well, good, I don't have to explain economics. But the economists always said there was an industry that looked like this. Okay, cost and demand. Those things have gone away. Let me give you an example. In my business, my company had bought from the exact same supplier for 70 years. I was in Texas, he was in Louisiana. It was 110 miles from port to port. It was the cheapest place I could buy it. If I went further than that, it cost more than that supplier. In 1 year, I started buying from Poland, Czechoslovakia, Brazil, and someplace else. Why? Because the industry had changed. The government had given them incentives to sell their products over here. Miriam can tell you, because Miriam drinks a lot of wine. We can buy Australian wine in Mississippi cheaper than you can buy it here. A bottle of Australian wine, Yellowtail, is cheaper in Mississippi than it is right here. Why?
Doesn't move a lot.
The
Doesn't move a lot.
resource.
Pardon me?
It doesn't move a lot. It's in the same place.
Yeah,
Process.
The resources
why?
Demand.
from Mississippi.
What?
Demand.
No? Although it's good wine, my wife tells me. She doesn't want me to. I don't drink, I don't drive, and I don't run around with my wife, so I've got to have something to do this. Don't ask me about the good bars, don't ask me about good women. I don't know anything about those. All I know how to do is this crap, and if that one this version, I'm dead. Okay? But why can we buy Yellowtail cheaper in the United States?
Is it something with the standard of living?
Competition.
You make more money here than we do in the United States per capita. Your average house here is $435,000, ours is $250,000. There's some real inequities that people don't understand. We can buy Yellowtail because the government's going in and said, we need exports, we'll pay you so much per case to sell this overseas. And it happens to be more than what the transportation costs and all the rest of that. They make more money exporting than they do selling in Australia, and you pay more for it than you do over where we live. Okay? A couple other opportunities, demographic changes. We're going to have a significant demographic change in education. What's that going to be? What's going to happen in the next 3 years demographically? We're going to have many more people trying to get in our universities. Why? I'm going to get a master's. I'm going to get an MBA. I'm going to get a whatever.
The economy's down.
The economy's down. They can't get a job, so they sell their parents. We're going to go back to school. And you're trying to unload these kids any possible way you can. If another degree will help, we got to go back to school. Okay? So that's a demographic change taking place. Changes in perceptions. As I told you, there's going to be a mood change in the United States, 6 to 9 months. Barack Obama's an idiot. And it's going to happen because he's doing this to us. We're going to be here. And he never says next year, next week, next millennium, next whatever. It's, oh, we're going to be here. And there's going to be somebody that's going to come up and line all these things up and say, here's 15 things we're going to be here, and we're still down here where we started. We don't believe in you anymore. It's going to happen. Okay. Other things that opportunities, there's new knowledge, there's new theory, there's new statistical techniques, there's new whatever in the world it may be. Okay, how do you get better at what you do? How do you produce more better research? The first thing you have to do is you have to learn to speak Latin. You need to learn how to read Latin. What am I talking about here? What was Picasso? What was he? He was a painter, but what was he before you knew of him? He was a classically trained painter. He could speak Latin. He could paint. He could paint like crazy, but he wasn't unique. He wasn't different. So what got him mad was, and why he started drinking was, and hanging around with loose women, was that he knew how to speak Latin, but he didn't know how to do anything else. And what you've got to do is you've got to learn to speak Latin. For what reason? Very, very important. Some of these things sound kind of silly. They're not. This is important.
Common language.
It's a common language, and you're going to fit in. When you want to have your radical, different, unique ideas, save it until you've got a little experience, 5 or 10 years down the road. Don't lose your enthusiasm. Don't learn that. Don't let that fire burn out in you. Make sure that you keep it, but learn how to fit in. Okay? I was classically trained in economics. I was classically trained in marketing. And again, I can speak that language. I just find it boring now. But you have to know it, otherwise you're going to be a heretic. And heretics very seldom make changes to society or to disciplines or whatever in the world it may be. You got to fit in. Next thing is you got to learn to read music. What does that mean? You've got to learn how to play the piano and at the same time learn how to improvise. People that play jazz piano, what were they trained as? Classical pianists, most of them. Even the blues players down where we live that are playing all these really erratic looking things, they were trained to play classical music. Learn to play classical and then change it. Do what you do best. Again, whether it's disseminating the knowledge or generating new knowledge. But do something that you have a unique advantage in, but know that you can step right back in and get a job playing the piano at the bar, because everybody knows they know what you're doing.